Hey everyone, and a huge, heartfelt welcome back to the channel. Seriously, wherever you are right now, thank you so much for joining me. Before we step back in time, sending you all the biggest virtual hugs and wishing you nothing but amazing health, happiness, and good vibes today. Stay awesome. Okay, let's transport ourselves. Close your eyes for a second. Forget the fairy tales, the shiny knights, and the Disney princesses waving from pristine towers. Imagine instead a place that's cold, damp, smelly, crawling with bugs, bursting with noise, and constantly on edge. A place where privacy is non-existent, danger is always lurking, and your bed might be crawling with fleas. Sounds like a nightmare? Welcome to the real daily grind inside a medieval castle. It wasn't just a fancy stone fortress, it was a crowded, chaotic, smelly village packed behind massive walls, filled with people from mighty lords to grumpy geese. What if I told you that surviving castle life was often harder than fighting a siege? Stick with me, because we're about to pull back the heavy tapestry and step into the astonishing, gritty, and utterly fascinating reality of what it was really like to live, work, eat, sleep, and survive within those iconic stone walls. Picture this: you wake up. It's freezing. Stone walls suck the heat right out of the air, even in summer. Your breath hangs in a fog. The thin straw mattress you share with your siblings, or maybe even strangers, if you're a servant, offers little comfort, and you're probably itchy from flea bites. Forget a quiet sunrise, the castle is already roaring to life. Down in the inner ward, the bailey, it sounds like a chaotic market mixed with a farmyard. Blacksmiths are hammering metal clang, clang, clang before dawn even breaks, horses need shoes, tools need mending, weapons need sharpening. Cows are lowing, pigs are squealing, chickens are clucking as they're herded out to graze or brought in for feeding. Dogs bark constantly, chasing rats or just getting underfoot. Woodcutters are already splitting logs for the massive fireplaces that devour fuel like hungry beasts. Carts rumble over cobblestones, bringing in supplies or hauling out waste. Shouts echo, servants calling to each other, stable boys yelling, guards changing shifts. The sheer noise is constant, overwhelming, and starts before first light. Privacy? Forget it. Unless you're the lord or lady in your private chamber, and even then, servants are always coming and going, everyone sees everyone else's business. You sleep, eat, work, argue, laugh, and get sick surrounded by dozens, sometimes hundreds, of other people. The castle isn't a quiet retreat, it's a bustling, noisy, messy, and incredibly alive community crammed into a defensive shell. So, who exactly is living in this crowded stone beehive? It's a whole world of people, each with their place, strictly defined. At the absolute top, of course, is the Lord and his family. He's the boss, the warrior, the judge, and the owner of everything inside and for miles around. His word is law. His wife, the lady, runs the entire household, and that's a massive job. Think CEO of a giant, non-stop company. She manages the food supplies, critical for survival, oversees all the servants, handles finances, runs the dairy and brewery, ensures everyone is clothed, organizes spinning and weaving, and acts as a nurse and sometimes even defends the castle if her lord is away. Then come the knights. These aren't just warriors, they're elite professionals, often the lord's relatives or trusted allies. They train constantly, sword fighting, jousting, horsemanship, because their job is to protect the lord and the castle. In peacetime, they might help manage the lord's estates, hunt, or just hang around the Great Hall. Below them are men-at-arms, professional soldiers, well-trained but not of knightly rank. They form the backbone of the castle's fighting force. Then there's the army of servants. We're talking dozens of them. Cooks slaving over smoky fires in the kitchen, scullions scrubbing endless pots, chambermaids cleaning rooms, or trying to, laundresses battling mountains of dirty linen in freezing water, stable hands mucking out stables and grooming horses, pages running errands for knights, butchers, bakers, candlemakers, gardeners, masons, carpenters constantly repairing things, gatekeepers, watchmen. Everyone has a specific task essential for keeping this mini-city functioning. Don't forget the animals. Horses are vital for transport and war, dogs for hunting and guarding, chickens for eggs, geese, pigs, cows for milk and meat, falcons for hunting, cats to control mice, though often distrusted, and rats, always rats. The castle is a complete ecosystem, a hierarchy where everyone knows their rank and their job, from the lord sipping wine to the kid collecting chicken eggs before dawn. Now, let's talk about the beating heart of the castle, the Great Hall. This is the central space, especially during the day and for meals. Forget cozy dining rooms, this is a massive, cavernous room, usually on the ground floor. Stone floors, high ceilings, often smoke-blackened, and giant fireplaces roaring at one or both ends, the main source of heat for the whole room. Long, heavy wooden tables and benches fill the space. This is where almost everyone eats together, a powerful symbol of the Lord's authority and generosity. But it's not just for eating. The Great Hall is the castle's multipurpose room, a courtroom where the Lord dispenses justice, sometimes harshly, a meeting place for discussing business, a venue for entertainment like minstrels, jugglers, or traveling storytellers, and often, for many servants and lower-ranking folk, it's even their bedroom at night. They'd sleep on the floor or on the tables themselves, bundled in cloaks, after clearing away the meal. Imagine trying to sleep amidst the lingering smells of food, smoke, damp rushes, and unwashed bodies. Speaking of rushes, the floor. Forget clean stone or wood. The floor was usually covered in a thick layer of rushes, dried grasses or reeds. This was the medieval version of carpeting, providing some insulation against the cold stone and soaking up spills, and worse. Problem is, these rushes weren't changed daily. Spilled food, grease, bones, dog droppings, mud tracked in from outside, spilled ale, it all got trampled down into the rushes. Over days or weeks, it became a disgusting, stinking, soggy mat crawling with fleas, lice, and other pests. Servants would occasionally add fresh rushes on top, but the old, rotting mess stayed underneath. The smell in the Great Hall, especially on a damp day or after a large feast, must have been an unforgettable assault on the senses: wood smoke, roasting meat, wet dog, stale ale, body odor, and that underlying sweet-rotten stench from the ancient rushes. This grand, impressive space was also a seriously unhygienic one. Eating in the castle was a major event and a clear display of status. Food wasn't just fuel, it was a sign of the Lord's wealth and power. But what did they actually eat? Forget constant feasts of roast boar and peacock. For most people, especially servants and soldiers, the diet was pretty basic and often monotonous. Bread was the absolute staple, eaten at every meal, lots of it. Not fluffy white bread, though. Usually, it was coarse, dark rye or barley bread, dense and gritty. Pottage was the other mainstay, a thick, stew-like soup simmering in a massive pot over the fire for days on end. It contained grains, like oats or barley, dried peas or beans, and whatever vegetables were available seasonally: onions, leeks, cabbage, turnips, maybe some herbs. Small bits of salted meat or fish might be added occasionally for flavor, especially for the upper tables. Meat was eaten, but fresh meat was a luxury, mostly for the Lord, his family, and important guests. Pork, from the castle's pigs, and chicken were common. Beef less so, as cows were valuable for milk and plowing. Game from hunting, deer, boar, rabbit, birds, was a prized treat, reserved for the high table. Fish was important, especially on Fridays and during Lent when eating meat was forbidden by the church. Fresh fish if you lived near water, but often it was dried, smoked, or heavily salted to preserve it. Dairy products like cheese, a great way to preserve milk, and butter were common. Fruits and vegetables depended heavily on the season and what the castle gardens could produce: apples, pears, berries, peas, beans. Spices were incredibly expensive, imported luxuries. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, these were worth their weight in gold and used sparingly, mainly by the Lord to show off. Salt was vital, not just for flavor but for preserving meat and fish through the winter. Honey was the main sweetener, sugar was a rare luxury item. For drinks, ale, a weaker, grain-based beer, was the everyday drink for almost everyone, including children. Why? Because water sources, wells or rivers, were often polluted and unsafe. Ale was brewed, which killed off some germs. Wine was imported and expensive, mostly for the Lord and his circle. Milk was usually turned into cheese or butter rather than drunk fresh. Meals were communal affairs. The Lord and Lady would sit at a raised dais at one end of the great hall, often on chairs. Important guests, knights, and the castle chaplain might sit with them or at tables nearby. Everyone else, servants, men-at-arms, visiting peasants, sat at lower tables further down the hall, strictly according to their rank. Food was served in trenchers, thick, stale slices of bread that acted as plates. Sauces and stews soaked into the bread, and after the meal, the gravy-soaked trencher might be given to the poor or fed to the dogs. People ate with knives and spoons, forks were rare until much later. Fingers were perfectly acceptable utensils. Bones and scraps were simply thrown onto the floor for the ever-present dogs to fight over. Manners? Basic by our standards. Burping was sometimes considered polite, a sign you enjoyed the meal. But spitting on the floor? Commonplace. Wiping greasy hands on clothes or the tablecloth? Normal. It was messy, noisy, and smelly, but also a crucial time for community, hearing news, and feeling the Lord's presence. Let's climb the stone spiral staircase. Watch your step, they're narrow, uneven, and spiral clockwise, so a right-handed defender above had room to swing a sword down at attackers. Where are we going? To the private chambers. Even the Lord and Lady needed some escape from the chaos of the great hall. Their solar, pronounced solar, was their private living room and bedroom, usually on the floor above the great hall for warmth and security. This was their sanctuary, relatively speaking. It might have proper glazed windows, a luxury, thicker carpets or better rushes on the floor, tapestries on the walls, not just for decoration, but to help insulate the stone and show wealth, comfortable chairs, maybe a writing desk for the Lord to handle estate business. Their bed was the pinnacle of comfort, a large wooden frame with curtains for warmth and privacy, filled with a mattress stuffed with feathers or wool, straw for lesser folk, covered in fine linen sheets and warm fur blankets. But even here, privacy was limited. Trusted servants slept in the same room or in small adjacent chambers, ready to assist day or night. Children of the Lord often slept here too when young. The solar was where the family relaxed, received close guests, or the lady did her embroidery. Below the solar might be the chapel. Faith was central to medieval life. The castle chapel allowed the lord, his family, and household to attend daily mass without venturing outside the walls. It might be a small, simple room or a more elaborate space, depending on the lord's wealth and piety. A castle chaplain lived there, saying mass, hearing confessions, running the household school for the lord's children and maybe pages, and acting as a secretary or advisor. For everyone else, forget private rooms. Knights might share a chamber. Servants slept wherever they worked, in the kitchens, stables, or as mentioned, often right on the floor of the great hall after clearing the tables. Comfort was minimal. Beds were simple straw-filled sacks or mats on the floor. Warmth came from shared body heat or proximity to a kitchen fire. Personal space. A luxury few could imagine. Okay, time for a less glamorous but absolutely vital topic, going to the toilet. Forget modern plumbing. Castle sanitation was basic. The most common feature was the garderobe. Sounds fancy, right? It was basically a stone or wooden seat built into the thickness of the outer wall, with a hole that dropped straight down. Where did it drop? Either into the castle moat, if it had one, a cesspit dug beneath the castle, or just straight down the outside wall onto the ground below. Imagine the stench in summer, especially around the base of the towers. Sometimes, the waste was collected by gong farmers, yes, that was a real job, who would empty cesspits at night, a dangerous, foul-smelling task. Chamber pots were used in private rooms or at night, and their contents were simply tossed out the nearest window in the morning. The cry, Gardelul. Roughly, watch out for the water, though it wasn't water, warned people below before the slop was thrown. Bathing? Not as rare as you might think, but not daily for sure. The lord and lady might have a wooden tub brought into their chamber periodically. Hot water had to be hauled up from the kitchens, so it was a major production. Servants or lower-ranking people might wash in troughs or use basins of water. Soap existed, often made from animal fat and ash. Teeth cleaning. Rubbing with a cloth, maybe a twig, or herbs for freshening breath. The overall smell inside the castle, despite efforts like strewing herbs or using perfumes, for the rich, was a constant mix of wood smoke, cooking smells, damp stone, wet wool, body odor, animal dung, and the ever-present underlying reek from the garderobes and old rushes. Keeping clean was a constant battle against grime, pests, and odor. Life wasn't all work, grime, and eating. People in the castle found ways to relax and have fun, though it was often rough by our standards. For the lord and knights, hunting was the ultimate pastime and vital training. It wasn't just sport, it provided fresh meat for the table. Hunts could be elaborate affairs with dogs, horses, falcons, and many attendants. Hawking, hunting with trained birds of prey, was also a prestigious and popular activity, especially for ladies. Gambling with dice or simple board games was common among all classes. Storytelling was a major form of entertainment, especially on long winter evenings. Minstrels or traveling performers, jongleur, might visit, singing songs, playing instruments like lutes or harps, juggling, or performing acrobatics. Sometimes, the castle might host a feast with more elaborate entertainment, jesters, musicians, maybe even dancing. For the lower ranks, simpler games like skittles, an early form of bowling. Wrestling, or foot races might be organized. Drinking ale and socializing was a primary leisure activity, often happening in the Great Hall after the main meal. Children played with simple toys, dolls, wooden swords, balls, hoops. Religious festivals and holy days provided breaks from work, often involving special meals, processions, and sometimes plays or pageants. But life was hard, and leisure time was limited, especially for servants whose days were long and filled with physically demanding chores. Moments of fun were cherished escapes from the daily grind. The constant shadow over castle life was danger. Castles were built for defense, and that need shaped everything. The threat wasn't just from armies laying siege. Raiding parties from rival lords, bandits, or even disgruntled peasants could pose a risk. Guards were always on duty, day and night, patrolling the walls, watching from the battlements, manning the gatehouse. The massive gatehouse was the castle's most vulnerable point and its strongest defense. It often had multiple barriers, a heavy outer gate, sometimes iron-bound wood, sometimes a portcullis, a spiked metal grating that could be dropped down, a narrow entrance tunnel, forcing attackers into a confined space, murder holes in the ceiling, for dropping rocks, boiling water, or hot sand on intruders, and inner gates. Drawbridges over moats could be lifted. Sieges were the ultimate nightmare. If an enemy army surrounded the castle, cutting off supplies and escape, life inside became a desperate struggle for survival. Food and water stocks were critical. How long could they last? Months? Weeks? The castle well was the lifeline. Waste piled up dangerously. Disease could spread like wildfire in the crowded, unsanitary conditions. Morale plummeted. Attackers might try to storm the walls with ladders, tunnel underneath to collapse a wall, sapping, or use siege engines like catapults, mangonels, trebuchets, to hurl massive stones or even rotting carcasses, to spread disease, over the walls. Defenders fired arrows, dropped stones and boiling liquids, and fought fiercely hand-to-hand on the walls. Life during a siege was a terrifying mix of boredom, starvation, fear, and sudden, brutal violence. The castle's design, thick walls, high towers, narrow windows, arrow slits, strong gates, was all about making it as hard as possible for attackers, giving the defenders the advantage. Everyone inside knew their role if an attack came, from the knights to the servants who might be pouring boiling water through the murder holes. Security wasn't an option, it was the reason the castle existed. Keeping this entire operation running smoothly was a monumental logistical challenge. Think about it, feeding hundreds of people every single day. The kitchens were industrial-scale operations, usually separate buildings, because of fire risk, connected to the Great Hall. Huge fireplaces roasted whole oxen or boars. Massive cauldrons bubbled with pottage. Ovens baked mountains of bread. It was hot, smoky, dangerous work for the cooks and scullions. Fuel was a constant headache, wood or charcoal needed in vast quantities. Where did the food come from? The lord owned vast estates, farmland, forests, rivers, villages. Peasants living on these lands, serfs, worked the fields, grew the crops, raised the animals, paid rents in grain, livestock, or labor. Much of this produce was brought to the castle as part of the lord's dues. Storing it was critical. Granaries held grain, cellars stored ale, wine, and salted or smoked meats. Dairy products needed cool storage. Water was another major concern. A deep, reliable well inside the walls was absolutely essential. Hauling water up by bucket for hundreds of people and animals was backbreaking daily labor. Waste disposal was a constant, smelly problem. Kitchen scraps, human waste, animal dung, it all had to be collected and removed, usually dumped outside the walls or into the moat, creating health hazards. Repairs were never-ending. Stonework crumbled, wood rotted, roofs leaked, metal rusted. A team of carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, and laborers was always busy patching, rebuilding, and maintaining the structure and its equipment. Running a castle wasn't just about fighting, it was about managing a complex, resource-intensive operation requiring constant effort from scores of people. Life in a medieval castle was tough, smelly, crowded, and often uncomfortable or dangerous. It was a world defined by hierarchy, hard work, constant noise, and the ever-present need for defense. There were moments of warmth, community, feasting, and entertainment, but they were woven into a fabric of daily struggle. Yet, despite the hardships, there's something undeniably compelling about it. The castle wasn't just a pile of stones, it was a living, breathing organism, a testament to human ingenuity in building for defense and community. It fostered intense loyalty, skilled craftsmanship, and complex social structures. It was a crucible where the medieval world, with its faith, its violence, its traditions, and its slow march towards the future, played out on a daily basis. So, the next time you see a picture of a majestic castle on a hill, remember the incredible, gritty reality within its walls. The freezing mornings, the smoky halls, the clang of the blacksmith, the smell of baking bread mixed with the stench of the garderobe, the lord dispensing justice, the lady managing chaos, the knight training, the servant hauling water, the child playing near the stables. It was messy, difficult, and profoundly human. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If this peek into real castle life surprised you or gave you a new perspective, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe for more deep dives into the past, and let me know in the comments, what aspect of castle life would you have found hardest to deal with? Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Peace.